Elizabeth is a princess who has just been called out in a banquet hall by her fiancé, Prince Freer. He says he is dissolving their engagement because he believes Elizabeth pushed his darling Sylvie down the stairs, so in other words, he wants to crack Sylvie. Elizabeth has no idea what he's talking about since she did absolutely no such thing. But Freer is too self-absorbed to care about a word she has to say, so on top of rescinding their engagement, he also sentences her to confinement in the dungeon. Elizabeth had been engaged to Freer for many years at this point, and she was fully invested in their relationship and did everything she could to improve herself so she could support him. She even ended up taking on a bunch of tasks that were meant to be the prince's job, and she didn't even question it at the time. Her maid would constantly warn her not to stay up too late at night because it's bad for her health. But Elizabeth would say she just needed to finish one last report because the prince was too busy with a meeting to do it himself. However, that meeting she was referring to was more of a party than an obligation, so basically, the prince had offloaded all his work onto Elizabeth so he could go have fun. At this point, Elizabeth was still trying to convince herself that all this was perfectly normal, so she told her maid she was fine with the way things were since she actually got things done a lot quicker when the prince wasn't around. Also, she's not doing it just for Freer's sake, but rather for the sake of the subjects, because she doesn't want them to have to suffer if matters like this are left unattended. On top of handling all the prince's political affairs for him, Elizabeth also runs a company known as Funnel Corporation, and it has been doing really well lately. So Elizabeth plans to expand so they can hire more employees. The whole reason she created the company in the first place was so she could give back to the community and use it to partake in philanthropic activities to help the poor. As a result of all her kind actions, Elizabeth has become quite popular amongst the townspeople, and they all say they'd love to thank her personally for all her help. But Elizabeth has always been too embarrassed to receive direct praise, so she has never actually revealed herself as the one behind the Funnel Corporation, and as such, no one recognizes her as she's walking by. And she was perfectly fine with things this way because she only wants to make the people happy and couldn't care less about receiving praise or recognition for it. The next day, while Elizabeth was busy with another large pile of paperwork, the prince finally rolled out of bed and came into her office to tell her that the Gecko group, the ones who invited him to that party the other day, are requesting access to the royal treasury to expand their business, so he wants her to write up the appropriate paperwork for it. However, Elizabeth immediately tells him she's not going to approve such a request. She had looked into the Gecko Corporation, and she found out that they've been skimming a lot of profit off their books lately, so if they were given access to the royal treasury, they'd no doubt start skimming there too. The prince becomes annoyed when she says that because he is trying to impress his new friends, and if Elizabeth rejects their proposal, then it's going to ruin his street cred with them. He tells Elizabeth to just do as he says because she's just his fiancée, but Elizabeth doesn't back down because she knows the rules are on her side, and agreeing to such a request would harm the royal family's reputation as a whole, so there's nothing Freer can say to change her mind. The prince then storms off in anger, and once he is gone, Elizabeth gets the attention of Freer's knight and asks him to please keep an eye on the prince so he doesn't end up getting tricked by any ill-intentioned individuals. Robert understands what she's trying to say, and he says the prince was probably just too tired from the trip back to think things through properly. Elizabeth sure hoped that was the case because an idea like giving a group of corrupt officials direct access to the royal treasury could have easily caused the decline of the kingdom. And Elizabeth wants to prevent something like that at all costs, because when a kingdom declines, it's the ordinary people who suffer the most. A little while later, Elizabeth is preparing to head out because now that she's done with the work for today, she finally has time for a much-needed break. So she asks Michelle to get her carriage ready because she wants to make every minute count. However, before she could leave, her father suddenly comes into the office looking for her. He is here to inform Elizabeth that an emergency meeting has been called in regard to recent monster activity, and the king will have to attend. So as the king's right-hand man, Elizabeth's father will have to go as well. Elizabeth asks when this meeting is scheduled for, and he tells her it's next week. But that's really bad news since next week was meant to be the kingdom's anniversary party. She says they are going to have to cancel the party now, but her father tells her they can't since the guests from faraway places must already be on their way by now. Thus, he says the party will be held as planned, and Elizabeth doesn't see how that's going to be possible with both the king and the chancellor away, but he explains that the king has personally entrusted everything related to the party into the hands of Elizabeth. She is shocked when she hears this and tries to refuse at first, but her father tells her that the king firmly believes that all will go well if she is left in charge, and he has no one else he trusts as much as her. So her father asks her to take on the task, and when he puts it like that, Elizabeth doesn't really have much of a choice. She's a bit upset that she didn't get a chance to enjoy her day off, But there's no time to worry about that because she has a lot of work ahead of her if she wants to make sure the anniversary party is a success. While she's in the middle of thinking about what to do, Michelle looks out the window and notices the prince openly flirting with Sylvia. She was appalled by how openly Freer was cheating on Elizabeth, but Elizabeth didn't really care since it's fairly common for a prince to have more than one consort, and she really doesn't have anything against Sylvia. Her only gripe is the fact that Sylvia was only recently adopted into a baron family and hasn't learned the proper etiquette for interacting with royals, but she doesn't think it's going to cause any problems. Elizabeth later invites Sylvia to have some tea with her in her room, and there, she politely warns Sylvia that if she wants to pursue a relationship with the prince, then she must be aware of the fact that her behavior can affect not only herself, but the prince's reputation and the reputation of the kingdom as a whole. Elizabeth then points out the injury Sylvia currently has on her leg, and the reason she's bringing it up is because she happened to find out that Sylvia got that injury while on an outing with a certain nobleman who isn't the prince. Now, Elizabeth is a civil lady, so she isn't going to call Sylvia out as the two-timing hoe she is. After all, the prince is pretty much doing the same thing to her, so she doesn't care about their messy relationship, but she does care about the image of the kingdom, so she tells Sylvia to refrain from cheating on the prince from now on. Sylvia keeps her head down and apologizes, but as she is leaving Elizabeth's room, she looks visibly pissed about the fact that Elizabeth caught her. At that moment, the prince just so happened to be walking by, so Sylvia got an idea to get back at Elizabeth and decided to play the victim in front of the prince. She turned on the waterworks and pretended to fall over in front of him, and when he asked her what happened, she pointed to the injury on her ankle and told the prince that Elizabeth was the one who did this to her, which leads us back to the present. Elizabeth tries to explain that she has no idea what the prince is talking about, and that aside, she tells him he shouldn't make such a scene when they've got guests from various different kingdoms in attendance today. But the prince doesn't care at all and orders Elizabeth to be sent to the dungeon for attempting to kill his beloved. Elizabeth still doesn't understand what's going on, and neither do any of the guards. But since Robert is the prince's personal knight, he doesn't hesitate to restrain Elizabeth. As Elizabeth is forced to the ground, she catches a glimpse of Sylvia's sly smile, and she immediately figures out that Sylvia was intentionally framing her for this. Pretty much everyone knows what's happening here is absolute BS, but with the king and her father away at the moment, the prince currently has the highest royal authority in the castle, so none of the guards can afford to oppose his orders right now. Thus, Elizabeth simply agrees to go to the dungeon for the meantime. Later on, word reaches the king, and Elizabeth's father receives news of what happened back in the kingdom while they've been gone, and the king is absolutely astonished by how foolish his son has been because he never could have imagined that he'd throw Elizabeth, the most capable woman in the kingdom, in jail over nothing. He wants to return immediately to set Elizabeth free and lay into his son over this. But this is where we find out that Elizabeth's dad really doesn't give a fuck about her because he just found out that she was unfairly imprisoned. And the first thing he did was convince the king that there was no need to go back because he didn't want to waste any time on Elizabeth. So he's basically leaving her to deal with everything on her own. And the king just goes along with it because he assumes her father would know what's best for his daughter. Back in the kingdom, a month goes by with Elizabeth in prison, and she had initially hoped she'd finally get to take a break from all her responsibilities for once. But even though the prince locked her up, he still somehow managed to force all his administrative work onto Elizabeth. A little while later, Michelle comes down to see Elizabeth while cloaking herself with magic, and to make sure no one suspects anything, Elizabeth uses hypnosis magic to knock the guard out. She then asks Michelle what's going on because she is sure word of this must have reached her father and the king by now, and she expected them to come back to straighten it all out. But Michelle informs Elizabeth that her father actually voted to leave her to figure things out on her own. And hearing that strikes a nerve with Elizabeth because her father always leaves her to deal with the dirty work he doesn't want to handle. And the bad news doesn't stop there because Michelle also mentions that the prince has begun going after her company as well. He is claiming that the Funnel Corporation was run by a traitor, and now he wants to replace all the executives Elizabeth chose with his own lackeys. Elizabeth thinks this is really bad since that idiot is going to destroy the company and put the kingdom in a bad spot. But Michelle doesn't understand why Elizabeth is still thinking about what's best for the kingdom that uses her as nothing but a convenient tool even after everything that has happened to her. Elizabeth agrees that it is infuriating to think about what the prince and Sylvia did to her, or the fact that her own father refused to come help her, but she says none of that is the fault of the people, so she doesn't want to let them suffer. However, Michelle has one more thing to report and informs Elizabeth that the prince and his inner circle have been spreading baseless rumors, accusing her of attempting to assassinate Sylvia and take over the country, and even though he has presented no evidence of this, The people have all begun believing and slandering her name, despite all the good she has done for them. And that was the final straw for Elizabeth, so for the first time she says, "Fuck," and decides she's not going to break her back for this kingdom a second longer. She then punches the wall to let out some frustration, and she thanks Michelle for opening her eyes because she now understands how foolish she has been. She could have broken out of here at any time with how strong her spells are, so she tells Michelle that they are finally going to leave this wretched kingdom. All beings in this world have mana, and a select few are able to control that mana to summon things called divine artifacts. Divine artifacts can be anything, including swords and spears, but in Elizabeth's case, her divine artifact manifests as 7 grimoires. And one of those grimoires allows her to record and manifest any type of magic. When the time comes for her to leave, she creates an ice clone of herself so people don't find out about it immediately. After that, she heads over to the estate of Viscount Lucas of the neighboring empire. Lucas recalls what happened at that party, and he is honestly still shocked that the prince would do something so stupid, because even a complete fool should be able to see that Elizabeth was the one behind most of the kingdom's successes over the past few years. He really wishes he had someone as capable as her on his side, and to his shock, as he is thinking that, Elizabeth suddenly pays him a visit. He is shocked to see her here and asks what she's doing. So Elizabeth explains that she is fed up with being used by the kingdom and would like to seek asylum in the empire. Lucas knows a golden opportunity when he sees one, so he agrees to let her stay in the empire, but he asks what she intends to do while she's here. And Elizabeth explains that she's going to get her revenge by destroying everything she helped build for the kingdom. To be clear, she explains that she has no intention of going directly against the kingdom and starting a war. She is simply siding with the empire because they are in the best position to oppose the kingdom, and though she has no special attachment to them, she assures him that the empire will benefit from the kingdom's downfall. With everything that had just happened, Lucas decides to leave the kingdom immediately since, despite how poorly Elizabeth was treated, she was still incredibly important to their operations. So the palace will be in an uproar once they find out that she's gone. The plan for now is for Lucas to take Elizabeth back to his domain on the border of the kingdom, and he says he's going to have to keep her there under surveillance for the time being, since she is still technically a resident of the kingdom, which Elizabeth thinks is more than fair. Once they finally arrive in Lucas's domain, Elizabeth notices that the people here really seem to like Lucas, which is a good sign, since it means he genuinely cares for his people. And Lucas is proud to say that he thinks he does a pretty good job of governing this land. They eventually make it back to Lucas's mansion, and there Elizabeth tells him she has a request she'd like to make. She asks Lucas to give her permission to open a business in his domain since she needs a way to earn money here, and Lucas isn't opposed to the idea, but then Elizabeth asks him for a loan of 100 gold coins to help her start up her business since all her money was seized back in the kingdom and she's currently flat broke. Lucas is a little hesitant since 100 gold coins is a lot of money, but Elizabeth assures him that she intends to pay it all back, and as proof of her sincerity, she even pulls out a magic contract, a document which binds the users to fulfill its terms whether they want to or not. It basically states that in a year's time, Elizabeth will repay Lucas 2 times his investment, and if she fails to do so, she will allow herself to be sold as a slave to cover the costs. Lucas thinks Ellie must have gone insane because he can't understand why she would come up with terms that are so disastrous for herself, but she says it doesn't bother her since she knows for a fact that she will be able to repay the loan. Since she is being so insistent, Lucas agrees to lend her the money, and the first thing Ellie does is buy a rundown old building for 1 gold coin. She says this is going to be their base of operations from now on, but Myrael is a bit confused as to why she would buy a place like this since it's practically fallen apart. Ellie admits that it's probably going to need a lot of work to fix this place up, but it's the best she could find for 1 gold coin, and they need to conserve as much capital as possible. A few days later, Ellie and Mary are both done renovating the building, and Mary asks if Ellie plans to make the focus of the business cosmetics like she did with her company back in the kingdom, and Ellie says she plans to do that eventually. But right now, they don't have the capital or workforce necessary to make products they can sell to nobles at scale, which is why the first item she plans to put up for sale is this bar of soap. Myrael takes a look at the bar of soap, and she can tell at a glance that it is of higher quality than the soap Ellie sold back in the kingdom, but the profit margins on this are slim, so they won't be able to make much money from it. However, Ellie says making money from the soap isn't her plan. The soap is just a stepping stone to allow her to establish her brand, so she's willing to take a loss on it for now. However, if she wants to establish herself, then she's going to need to build herself at least a few connections, and she knows the perfect place to start. First of all, she heads to the Church of Liberus, and while there, she runs into the head priest. She explains that she recently opened up a new business, so she wants to pray for its success there, and the priest tells her she's more than welcome to, but just then, two kids happily run in. They are here to tell the priest that they made some more money today, and the priest thanks them for their hard work, but he says he is currently busy talking to someone, so they'll have to come back later. The kids understand and happily run off to go play a little, and once they are gone, the priest explains to Ellie that he runs the orphanage next door, and those were a few of the kids he looks after. Ellie says the priest must be doing a really good job since those kids seem really well taken care of, and the priest says he does his best, but he does admit that it has been a little difficult for him since running an orphanage is rather expensive, and though he wanted to keep the kids out of it, they found out that he was struggling financially and volunteered to pick weeds around town to earn a little money to support the orphanage. He feels like he has failed the kids since children their age shouldn't have to work, but Ellie assures him that the kids appreciate what he has done for them. As a matter of fact, she says she'd like to make a small donation to the orphanage, but when she hands the priest 5 gold coins, he tells her he can't accept this much money. Ellie insists that it's not a problem for her, since she sees it as an investment. After all, those kids are going to become her future customers someday, so it's in her best interest to make sure they are taken care of now. After that, Ellie heads home, and when she gets there, she meets up with Mireille, who has been busy all day handing out some of their soap to the maids of nobles so they can build a customer base. And just as expected, within 3 months, their sales have begun growing steadily, and they've been able to expand into other cosmetic products like lotions and shampoos, so they have made a decent amount of money. Ellie has also made it a habit to donate some money to the orphanage every so often, so she asks Mireille to deliver this month's donation for her, and once that's done, she and Mireille head out for lunch together. Ellie is glad that their company has been growing lately, but she's sure their competitors aren't too happy about it. So she asks Mireille if the Gaz's company has made any moves against them yet. She says that they have been mostly quiet for now, so Ellie asks her to continue monitoring them. And she also reminds Mireille to be especially careful not to let the formula for the soap leak since, until they firmly establish themselves, that soap is their lifeline. She also conveniently mentions that the soap's secret formula is hidden in their safe in the store, all within earshot of this guy who happens to work for the Gaz's company. Meanwhile, back in the Gaz's company, Gaz's is absolutely fuming at the fact that the trait company that Ellie started has been stealing more and more of his customers with each passing day. His assistant tries to assure him that it's not a big deal since the trait company is still only a small-scale business, and they don't have that large of a customer base. But Gaz's knows that the trait company must be intentionally limiting their production so they can select customers, and through that means, they have been systematically stealing all of Gaz's good customers and leaving him with all the troublesome customers who complain nonstop. If this keeps up, then Gaz's is going to lose even more money to them in the coming years, but because they've built their client base with influential nobles, he can't risk going after them directly without antagonizing the nobles who buy from them. Just then, there's a knock at the door, and Grants, the one who was at the restaurant, walks in. Gaz's doesn't like Grants and tells him to get out of here because he assumes Grants is here to beg for money, and Grants is a nervous wreck because of all of Gaz's constant yelling, but he works up the courage to tell him that he actually has information on the trait company. Gaz's freezes up when he hears this, and for once, he actually decides to take Grants seriously and asks him what the information is. Grants explains that he was out eating at a restaurant, and he happened to be sitting near 2 girls from the trait company who were talking about how the secret formula was hidden in the company's safe. After learning of this, Gaz's realizes that if they were able to get their hands on that secret formula, then he might be able to make the same soap as Trait, or even better. Take advantage of their already established name to make bootleg versions and make a fortune. He then tosses a bag of coins to Grants as his reward and tells him to get out of his sight and not to breathe a word about this conversation to anyone. Meanwhile, over on Ellie's end, Mireille has just found out that over in the kingdom, she has been branded a traitor and a bounty has been placed on her head. And to make matters worse, it was her own father who took the initiative to bring charges against her despite knowing that everything the prince accused her of was absolute BS. The fact that her own father is willing to sell her out so easily just to cover for the incompetence of the prince hurts, but she can't let herself get distracted by his actions, especially when they are in the middle of their plan to get revenge on the kingdom. A few moments later, there's a knock at the door, and when Mireille answers, she is met by a woman named Hildegard, who says she's here on behalf of the Merchant Guild's legal department to investigate a troubling matter. Ellie remains calm and asks Hildegard what she wants with her. So Hildy explains that there have been reports of Ellie's soap causing severe rashes and sores to customers, so she would like to take Ellie into custody so she can get to the bottom of it. Mireille thinks those are bogus accusations since there's no way their soap would cause such a reaction, But Ellie says there's no need to argue and agrees to go with Hildegard to be questioned because she knows she has nothing to hide. A little while later, Ellie is sitting in the interview room with Hildegard, and after reviewing all the ingredients of Ellie's soap, nothing in the formula seems like it would cause any harm to the customers. As a matter of fact, since Ellie only sells to a select few nobles, she knows for sure that none of her customers have complained of any sores, so she suggests that this must be the work of a copycat brand. Hildegard acknowledges that it looks like Ellie has nothing to do with the incident, and Ellie asks if she could take a look at the bootleg brand of soap that caused the sores. Hildegard hands it over, and after inspecting the soap, Ellie confirms that it is indeed a copycat product, and she suspects it was made using a stolen portion of their recipe. Hildegard asks what she means by that, so Ellie explains that she keeps her recipe in her company's safe, but following that recipe alone would lead to a toxic product, so it needs to be neutralized using the formula from the second recipe, which Ellie keeps on her person at all times. She also suspects that whoever made this soap must be pretending to be a part of the Trait company to use their brand to attract customers, and after hearing all this, Hildegard is convinced that Ellie is innocent in all this and is in fact the victim of brand theft. She then decides to launch an investigation into whoever sold this soap, and it doesn't take long for her to trace it back to Gaz's. When he sees the guild's legal department show up, he realizes it's over for him. But even after being brought in for questioning and being faced with Ellie, who demands compensation for the damage Gaz's has done to her brand with his bootleg soap, he still remains smug and tells her he isn't paying a dime in compensation because the guild's enforcers don't have the authority to force him to pay something like that. If she really wanted to claim compensation, then her best bet would be to get a priest from the Church of Liberus to act as a judge, but there's no way she'd be able to convince one of them to go out of their way to settle such a petty matter. However, unfortunately for Gaz's, Ellie just so happens to be good friends with one of those priests, and as soon as he heard what happened, he immediately came over to help and rule in Ellie's favor, demanding that Gaz's pay compensation for his sins. As a result, Gaz's is forced to hand over the managerial rights, equipment, and assets of his company, which is coincidentally exactly what Ellie needs to expand her own operations. Ellie tells Gazaru that as payment, she will take all of Gazaru Commercial's business rights, management rights, and personal property, along with all of the firm's tools, materials, and workers. Gazaru sits down, feeling defeated. Artie walks into the room and says sorry to Ellie for all the trouble they caused, but Ellie tells her that it was not her fault. Instead, it was the Merchants Guild who was at fault, and she has no reason to feel ashamed. Arte tells Ellie there is one more thing she wants to talk about. She says there is a man who tricked Gazaru into stealing the soap formula, and his name is Grant Carlton. He was the bookkeeper for Gazaru Commercial, but Arte did not have enough proof to face him about it. Ellie understands and tells her that now that Traitor has taken over Gazaru Commercial, Grants is now one of her own workers. Ellie asks Artie to let her handle this matter on her own. Ellie asks Myrael if he is coming, and she says she has already sent for him. Grants walks into the room and says sorry, but Ellie tells him to skip the polite talk since he already knows what she is about to say, and Grants agrees. Ellie hands Grants a bag and tells him he did good work and this is his reward. Grants thinks what she gave him is too much, but Ellie tells him she is also going to put him on the leadership team at Traitor. She will tell the guild that since he feels so sorry, she will let the matter go. Grants feels thankful and thanks Ellie for letting it go. Grants is one of the people she had told Muriel to reach out to. She had already learned from their research that Gazaru was mixed up in shady dealings, and to make his crimes clear for everyone to see, they needed someone to push him into stealing the soap formula. Grants reminds Ellie of the deal they made before all this started. Ellie follows Grants to his home, and Grants sees his wife praying. His wife asks him where he has been and tells him their daughter is suffering badly. Ellie introduces herself to Grants' wife and tells her she heard what happened to her daughter. She explains that Grants was working for her for the sake of his daughter, and she should forgive him. Grants tells Ellie that his daughter was hit by a carriage. They managed to gather enough money for healing potions, but they were told she would not get any better. Ellie tells him not to worry, since she can heal his daughter with healing magic, but Grants is confused and asks what that is. She lies and tells him it is a magic item that boosts magic power. She had to lie because she could not let him know about her divine artifact. The power of the Grimoire of Beelzebub is to record magic, and it has recorded strong healing magic from the Archbishop of the Kingdom. So with it, even she can use powerful healing spells. Ellie casts the spell, Heal, and a green light covers Grants' daughter, and she begins to wake up. Grants and his wife feel deep thanks toward Ellie and do not know how to repay her. But Ellie tells him she only did what she promised in their deal, so he should not worry about it. She asks him to keep what happened a secret, since she can only use this magic on rare occasions. That takes care of Gazaru and the last bit of cleanup. They have already set up a delivery route with a large company and gained many loyal customers. Lucas is amazed at how Ellie turned 100 gold coins into so much money, but Ellie tells him she already said she would bring him huge profits. Lucas tells Ellie she is free to run her business anywhere in the capital or across the empire. He has heard that she is wanted in the kingdom, but he has no reason to think the kingdom sent her as part of some plan, and Ellie is thankful for his understanding. Ellie tells Mireille that Lucas gave them free travel rights, so they should make good use of it. She gives Mireille the gifts for the temple and tells her it will help to have the Church of Libris on their side, and they will keep protecting them as long as she stays innocent. Lunoa asks for permission and walks into Ellie's office to tell her she brought the papers from the capital. Ellie thanks her and tells her she has truly grown during her training, but Lunoa says she is still not good enough, though because Ellie saved her life, she will work as hard as she can. Ellie tells her that is a good attitude to have, and Lunoa leaves the room. Lunoa has gotten better since she was hit by a carriage, and it turns out she has a special magic skill called Item Analyze, which is very useful for merchants like them. Ellie decided to keep Lunoa on as a student and teach her magic. Now that they are moving into the capital market, they will need their old members too. Ellie uses her divine artifact called the Grimoire of Belphegor, one of the 7 grimoires, which records deals. By making a pact and paying a price to beings from other realms, such as fairies and the underworld, she can borrow their powers. Ellie says a spell and offers a silver coin, and white birds appear. Ellie tells them she is counting on them. Ellie tells Muriel that they are skilled at their jobs, and she is sure they will gather quickly. Once they are ready, the group will head to the capital. Over the next 6 months, Tritre Commercial bought up many firms and grew a great deal. Ellie decides to expand into the capital, and she leaves Grants in charge as deputy director while she is away. She is sure he is more than able to take on her role, and she is counting on him. She also tells Stua to help Grants as his assistant, and Stua agrees. The social season for nobles is coming, and Lunoa cannot join the events yet, but the capital is the heart of the nation, so Ellie tells Lunoa to study hard. Lunoa notices the road has turned rocky, and Ellie tells Mireille to be careful. Lunoa asks Ellie why she should be careful, and then an arrow is shot toward Lunoa. Ellie pulls her out of the way. Ellie explains that rough parts of the road like this one are not patrolled often by the local army, so you tend to run into bandits there. Ellie tells Mireille to look after Lunoa, and she steps out to face the bandits. One bandit is shocked and asks if she really plans to fight all of them alone, and Ellie says yes. Ellie uses ice magic to strike the first man, and the bandits are shocked that she cast a spell without speaking any words, and they think she must be a powerful mage. They tell each other to surround her and stop her from using magic, and she tells them she does not even need to use magic. The bandit is stunned as she cuts down 3 of his friends at once, and he begs for his life. He tells her he was just a farmer who could not make a living after paying his taxes, so he became a bandit. Ellie tells him she does not care about his reasons and cuts him down, since no matter his reason, he is still a bandit, and as a merchant, she shows no mercy to bandits. Lunoa asks Ellie if she killed him, and Ellie tells her bandits are no different from goblins or orcs. They take the money merchants worked hard for by force, and sometimes they even take their lives. If you show mercy, they will just attack someone else instead, which is why the rule is to kill bandits on sight, and she should remember that. Mireille tells Ellie there is someone asking for a ride ahead, and asks what she should do. Ellie tells her to stop, since she does not think she can leave a woman of the church behind. Tida tells Ellie she has saved her from a long walk. The thought of walking all the way to the capital had left her feeling discouraged. Ellie tells her she is lucky, since they happen to be heading to the capital too, and Tida gives her thanks. Tida tells her the Lord must have brought them together, and she introduces herself as a walking nun. They are church women who travel the land as part of their training, visiting small villages to give healing magic for free. Walking nuns are held in high regard, especially in remote villages that have no doctors or healers. Luno asks if they really heal people for free, and she thinks that is amazing. Ellie tells Tita that she does important work, and Tita says it is just part of her training. Ellie introduces everyone to Tita, and Tita hopes they will all enjoy the trip to the capital together. Lunoa asks Ellie how she knew the bandits would show up, and Ellie explains it was because the road had become so rough. Keeping up the roads is an important part of ruling well. Lucas is a fine lord, and he puts a lot of effort into keeping the roads in good shape, while the lord of this area is likely a fool. If you keep the roads clear, the flow of goods gets better, which helps the economy grow. Merchants and adventurers gather in areas that are doing well, which lets you collect more in taxes, so the land grows richer. That is why lords put so much effort into keeping and guarding the roads. Ellie asks Lunoa what would happen if the roads fell into ruin, and Lunoa answers that the flow of goods would slow to a stop and farms in remote areas would not get the supplies they need. Ellie asks what else would happen, and Tita wakes up and tells her to think of it the other way around. If the roads are in bad shape, the food and medicine made in remote places start costing much more to bring to the city. The people in town would need to spend more carefully to afford them, and that slows down the whole economy. Ellie says she is surprised the clergy knows so much about economics, but Tita tells her she knows far less than merchants do. Ellie explains that villages and remote areas are not the only places where prices would rise, since as a result, farmers lose their way and turn into bandits, and it costs more to move goods because you need guards, which leads to higher prices. Lunoa asks Ellie why the lords do not repair the roads, and Ellie tells her it is because they are foolish. They care too much about short-term money to worry about road repairs, and it is the common people who suffer when their leaders are fools. Muriel tells Ellie that more bandits are blocking their path, and Ellie tells Muriel to watch over Lunoa and Tita. But Tita wants to fight too, and tells Ellie not to worry about her. Ellie thinks she should probably avoid killing anyone in front of a holy woman, so she rushes at one of the bandits and punches him hard in the stomach, knocking him out. She turns around to see Tita smashing a bandit's head in without mercy. Tita tells Ellie she is finished and asks why Ellie has not killed hers yet. She tells Ellie that she must be quite kind-hearted, and Ellie disagrees. Tita asks if she was holding back because Tita was watching, and says sorry for that, but tells Ellie that bandits left alive are nothing but trouble, so she will take care of Ellie's share too. Just as Tita is about to smash the bandit's head, he wakes up and begs for mercy, but Tita tells him the Lord is merciful and people are sinful. If he repents, the Lord will show him mercy, but bandits are not counted as people to her, so they do not deserve the Lord's mercy, and she kills him. Ellie wonders if she should rethink how she sees clergy people. Tita shows Ellie that she found a gold tooth, and that they can sell it for good money. Ellie tells Tita to wash off the blood first, since if Lunoa sees her covered in it, she will be terrified. At the mansion, Freedy's butler tells him to think again about his plan to give out meals in the slums, and asks why he wants to give aid to people who can barely get through each day. What could be wrong with earning their gratitude? The butler asks whether he has read the budget reports, and Freedy says yes. The butler explains that handing out meals in such a careless way will drain the kingdom's treasury dry. Freedy tells him not to be foolish, since Elizabeth used to feed the poor every week, but the butler tells him that she paid for it with her own money, and that Elizabeth never once used the nation's treasury for anything beyond plans that had been given to the throne. What is more, Elizabeth found work for the poor, helping them build stable lives. Helping the poor means more than simply handing out food. Freedy grows annoyed and tells him to cancel it, then walks out of the room. The butler thinks none of this would have happened if Elizabeth were still here. Tita is drunk and asks the server to bring more. Ellie asks if she should really be drinking this much, since she is a nun, and Tita tells her that alcohol is the water of life given to them by God. Besides, those bandits earned her a lot of money, and she thinks the real sin would be not drinking at a time like this. Ellie asks if she has already exchanged it, and Tita tells her she exchanged it the moment they arrived in town, and offers to split the money with Ellie, but Ellie tells her to keep it. Tita asks if she is sure, and Ellie tells her to think of it as a gift. Tita goes to hug Ellie, but Ellie tells her to get off her, since her nose is running. Lunoa tells Muriel that Ellie looks like she is having fun. Muriel says Ellie always used to look tense, with no one to open up to, but these days she sees her smiling happily, and she is glad. Freedy tells Sylvia that dealing with those stubborn fools wears him out, but looking at her calms his tired mind, and she is thankful for that. But someone hiding behind a pillar says that having the rug pulled out from under you by that fool must be miserable. This was the end of episode 3. Subscribe to not miss the next part.